next we have a live presentation from Dr. Karamlou from Cleveland Clinic, and she is going to talk about determining the best care delivery for your child with CHD, where, with whom, and for how long. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Dr. Karamlou share hers.
Great. Well, hello, everybody. Let me share my screen, and I will go to the presenter view here. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
We can see it.
Yeah, great. All right. So thank you for the opportunity to show some of our data. I'm going to be talking about what we're calling the best care delivery, and you can debate whether you think it's the best, but we're going to provide some data that might help sway you. So I just thought I would start with this because I think it's important in the virtual arena that we find ourselves to know who everybody is. And so I am really a surgeon, a scientist, and a mom. And that's my daughter, Lourdes, who is now in 5th grade. And my practice clinically as a congenital heart surgeon, and obviously have a big interest in research. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge our patients and our families because they are really, excuse me, the ethos of who we are and why we do what we do. And they're what drive us to excellence every day. I wanted to share just a couple of snippets from CHD parents and what their thoughts about some of this is, because rather than me telling you what you all think is important, I thought it might be interesting to hear directly what was important. So one CHD parent said, "It's the long-term milestones that matter most. Will my child go to college, get married? I have a daughter with HLHS, and sometimes when I look at her, I think, because it's so hard to even say out loud, will she never be a mother, never know what it is to love someone like I love her?" And Tabitha Donner, who is the president of Now Conquering CHD, the Ohio chapter, and since I'm at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, Tabitha and I have had some chances to interact, and she said something that was really important. And this is the voice of a CHD parent and an advocate. We talk a lot about changing outcomes, but what we should really be talking about is changing the process. And the process has to have all of the key players communicating and collaborating with transparency and in the best interest of the whole patient for the greatest success. And finally, another CHD mom said, "It's not about my child, because the work that I do actually takes me away from my child. It's about extending the reach of advocacy." And I thought that was really, really powerful. So I want to acknowledge the Children's Heart Foundation, who funded this work, and we have presented a lot of this work in over 10 national presentations. And this is about regionalization of care for congenital heart surgery. And this is our first ad hoc meeting, and this is our co-investigators, and Dr. Dave Overman, Dr. Carl Welke, Dr. Sarah Pasquale, Dr. Carl Backer, Dr. Romano, and Dr. Jacobs, who all were part of this initiative. And this was at the STS in San Diego in 2015. And I have to thank all of my collaborators. So what do I mean by the best care delivery? Well, there are different paradigms to consider. One is collaboratives and shared learning. And this was really championed back in the days of the Northern New England Cardiovascular Collaborative, which did some amazing transformational work a long time ago with round robin visits and really made an impact in improving cardiac surgery, adult-acquired surgery outcomes. This has been now carried on. Mike Gaze did some really wonderful work recently between the PC4 group and the PHN, looking at extubation in cohorts of congenital heart patients following surgery. We did some of this work when I was at the University of California, San Francisco, with a collaborative, which we called C4, or the Congenital Cardiovascular Collaborative. There's also mothership satellite programs, which have been used successfully at Stanford, and also by our group here. We have a very strong affiliation with Akron Children's Hospital, and that has led to improved outcomes at both campuses and enhanced volumes as well. And then the final model, which we think is potentially one of the most important models going forward, is one of centralization of care. And that could be with all CHS care or just with complex patients. So does doing something often mean doing it well? This is a picture of Malcolm Gladwell, who many of you may know from his amazing books that he has written, and also he is a columnist and essayist for the New Yorker. And Malcolm Gladwell is actually, I think, really a visionary, and he talks about deliberate practice and 10,000 hours of this. And he uses the term deliberate because we can't just do things over and over. We have to do things correctly over and over in order to get better. We know in congenital heart surgery that there is a strong relationship between volume and outcomes. This is a early study that preceded our work on regionalization, and one was the primary drivers of our work, looking at inflection points for decreasing mortality, where we found that case volumes around 300 led to improved outcomes. This was also then followed up in other studies where the European Congenital Heart Surgical Association used similar analyses to show also a volume outcomes relationship, and they actually showed some inflection points using a very complex algorithm and equation here with number per center per year around 60, where that curve of increasing mortality here began to flatten out. So where do we start from? When we started looking at how do we deliver the best care, we thought, well, what do we have now? What's the lay of the land? And so this is back in 2012 now, we wanted to look at what did the landscape look like. And back in 2012, we got 39 states to send us data, and we looked at all of these patients and tried to figure out where are these patients getting care at present. We had a final cohort, which is listed here, of around 15,000 patients. And in hospitals, we then took the hospitals and said you had to do at least one classifiable congenital heart case, which left us with 153 hospitals. Median annual case volumes, there was a lot of programs that did very few cases. In fact, 36% did less than 51 cases per year. And really only 31% did what we consider to be high volume centers, over 151 cases. What about high risk cases? And the high risk cases, that was also very interesting. 28% of centers didn't do any high risk cases, which we classified as risk adjusted in congenital heart surgery stratification, which is the algorithm that Kathy Jenkins championed many, many years ago. And we took the upper echelon of these cases, and it was striking to us that there's really only 14% of centers which are doing more than 30 highly complex cases per year. So where were these centers located? These are the centers that did high volumes, or what we consider to be high volumes based on the spread of the data. And I want you to look and see that a lot of these are clustered together. If you start looking at subsequently lower and lower volume centers, We're adding in now successively lower volume centers, including those with less than 50 cases per year, which was again 36% of the cases. And look at all of these centers and how closely these centers are clustered, many of them right next to each other doing very low volumes. And in fact, there were 3 states that really had a lot of hospitals that did congenital heart surgery. California had 22. Texas had 13, New York State had 11. So if you look at California, hospitals that were located within 25 miles of one another, there was 15 of them, okay? And again, some of these in the black stars were really low volume centers. So why do we need all these centers doing very low volumes of cases? And we were very interested in these low volume or very low volume hospitals because these hospitals have been the subject of some scrutiny, and frankly, rightly so. If you're doing less than 25 cases a year, why are you doing congenital heart surgery cases? Is that what is best for our patients and our families and our specialty? And I'm not going to answer that question because I think it's a very contentious question, and I certainly have my biases, but I think these are centers where we really have to look at, why do these centers need to exist? What is the motivation? Is it quality? Is it provision of care? Or is it mainly economic? And again, these are very closely located. And if you look at these low volume centers that are located within very close proximity to a larger center, we had 20% of these. So again, it's really not that these hospitals need to be there to provide care because there's no larger hospital or no other hospital in the region. So again, why do these hospitals exist? Where are patients going for care? Well, we discovered something very striking, that patients actually travel about 40 miles in the current construct to get congenital heart care. And in fact, 25% travel over 100 miles, and 53% of patients bypass their nearest hospital. So in essence, the current system we have right now is already regionalized, in that patients are traveling to what they are potentially perceiving as higher quality hospitals. That was kind of important to us. So they travel a long way to get care. I'm going to skip through some of this because I want to get to some of our newer data. And I'm going to skip through this, and I wanted to get to these data, which look at simulations that regionalize patients. So this is a simulation, and if we were to gradually coalesce hospitals such that lower volume hospitals would be centralized with their patients being redistributed to other hospitals based on volume thresholds, would this mean improved outcomes? And would this come at a prohibitive increase in travel distance, which is what people say is one of the impediments to centralized care? And so we went through an algorithm, which is listed here, where we identified hospitals and we redistributed them based on these volume thresholds. And then we recalculated travel distances for hospitals and mortality. And what we found was really interesting. So if you look at this curve, what this shows in the red line is the mortality, or the patient movement rather. Red line is patient movement, and this blue line is mortality. And what we found is that we started with a mortality rate of around 4.5%. And as patients here, these are the hospitals that remain. So remember, we started out with 153 hospitals. As we subsequently started regionalizing patients and in some ways coalescing smaller volume hospitals, more and more patients were relocated to other hospitals. And as this happened, the mortality rate went down significantly to 2.9% from 4.5%. What did this do to travel distances? Well, travel distance actually didn't increase as much as we thought. So as this is the median travel distance, and this is the mean, if you want to look at it in two different ways. So mean and median started around 40, and travel distance essentially doubled when we regionalized care maximally. So travel distance increased from 40 miles to 70, and regionalization to high volume centers decreased our mortality rate and saved 116 lives per year. That's 116 children. So finally, we wanted to see whether we could then rationalize care, regionalize care based on where people live. So if we distributed things based on population densities, again, if you're Walmart or Nordstrom or Heinen's or Safeway, you're going to put stores where people live because you want to give your store a viability and put it where people will use it and where they don't have to travel a long way. So we said, let's use that business model and put hospitals theoretically where people live. And not just people, but where mothers of childbearing age live. Okay, so 15 to 44 years of age, and we estimated the US population to be 325 million, and lo and behold, every 100 operations per million, that actually gives us 32,500 cases a year. We then constructed a pretty complex analysis, which I'm going to go through quickly, where we had these metropolitan statistical areas, which are areas which define population centers based on density. And we theoretically put hospitals in each metropolitan dense area. And what we found, and I'm going to go through this because I know I'm running out of time, is that the best algorithm that served the greatest number of people and maximized volumes at centers and minimized travel distance was a system where we had 48 states served by 57 hospitals. Remember, we started with 153 hospitals. That would translate to a volume of each hospital of about 450 cases, and actually travel distance would go down. So if we started and we regionalized care using a 300 case per year threshold, travel distance would be reduced by 34% median and 9% mean, and we would get a 56% reduction in the current numbers of hospitals. So this novel model can serve as a platform to improve value and efficiency and can be generalized to other highly specialized care delivery systems. And quickly, remember California, which was the state where we had 15 hospitals located within 25 miles of one another. So we built a system around this regionalization model. All of the centers in California were part of it. And we actually used this to define thresholds of care in a very densely populated state with a lot of centers. So final thoughts from a publication that just came out: the practicality and feasibility of a fully regionalized system for congenital care is unclear at present. A thoughtful organization of congenital cardiac surgery services for specific conditions and subspecialties would involve some component of centralized care at centers that with demonstrated superior outcomes coupled with collaborative learning or affiliate models to extend outreach to geographically remote areas or regions with a high prevalence of socioeconomic disparities that could limit access. And I'll just end with T.S. Eliot's quote, and this is a team sport. So thank you very much. Happy to take questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karamlou, and thank you for all of you at Cleveland Clinic.